So right after I did the Jurassic Park video on the new Mattel toys, I got a random email from somebody at Super7. And they asked me if I wanted to get some samples of their ReAction figure line to review for the channel. And I immediately said, well, hey, I don't want to be taking product if there's going to be a caveat or some kind of embargo or an expectation about what I'm going to say about these figures, because they are modern retro. And the PR person got back to me and said, no, there is no caveat, no expectation, no embargo. We would just really like to send these to you and get your thoughts on them, do a video. I said, okay. So they sent them to me, and here they are. They sent me the Planet of the Apes line and the Street Fighter II line. Now on the box for that it said regular edition. I don't know what that means. But I have them here in the studio. And a few years ago, you might remember that we did a discussion, Melinda and I, on the original run of ReAction figures. At the time, those were being done by Funko in partnership with Super7. But as of 2016, I believe, Super7 has taken the entire ReAction line back in-house, and they're distributing and designing them themselves. I'm not really sure what level of involvement Funko had beyond distribution before 2016. I'm not quite clear on that. But I can tell you this. These figures, quality-wise, they're pretty much identical to the original ReAction figures. I mean, some of them have molded color limbs, which is very retro, especially for flesh tones. But a lot of them still have the painted costumes and things like that, the painted parts. They are, how would I describe this? They are generally better paint applications. The original ones, like the Back to the Future ones and the Firefly ones, they had almost a hand brushed look at times. It was a very matte, rough texture to the paint. But now it's a very shiny, polished look, as you would have gotten from, say, a brand new Star Wars figure in the 70s or 80s, which is really cool. The place where I think they've really upped their game since taking it back with Super7, if this is any indication, is the packaging. I mean, the packaging really pops now. It really stands out. The Planet of the Apes packaging reminds me of the Clash of the Titans vintage line from Mattel. I mean, it has the beautiful painted portraits with the movie logo. They really do look good as display pieces. That being said, what were the problems with the original ReAction line, and are they still there? The real problem with the ReAction line is, quality-wise, are the sonic welds. They barely hold together. That's not to say that your figures are going to pop apart, but when you move their limbs or you move their legs, the seams visibly split. And you're always wondering, like, is this going to pop apart? Is it designed to do this? It really doesn't look good. There's that derriere split right at their lower area right here. So, when you pop them like this, there's this big split, in their rear end. This is the Zangief figure from the Street Fighter II line. I'm going to tell you, while the overall presentation is a little better than the original Funko run. Like, I think he looks more finished than, say, Marty McFly or Snake Plissken for the most part. I mean, these figures weren't bad. He still has the sonic weld problems. So I have to assume that the rest of these are going to have that sonic weld split issue as well. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, Michael, why didn't you take them out of the package so that you could test each one individually? Well, I gave that a lot of thought. What it boiled down to for me was this. The ReAction line from 3 or 4 years ago, a lot of the packaging was generic. And I don't know if that's because Funko didn't want to spring for the likeness rights, or, Super7 didn't want to spring for the likeness rights, but they didn't. And so a lot of the lines like Rocketeer, Back to the Future, They were just a generic image of like a DeLorean on blackness, and then it said Back to the Future. It cheapened the experience because that wasn't the way most licensed toy lines in the 80s looked. They had that Kenner look. They had a photo or a painting like with Clash of the Titans. And that's where the Super 7 lines really shine. You know, both Street Fighter 2 and the Planet of the Apes line, the packaging is gorgeous. And it seems to me like they've leveled up as far as their courage when it comes to not having likeness rights. So for example, on the Charlton Heston figure for Taylor, they clearly didn't have the likeness rights for Heston, but they went ahead and painted a portrait anyway that approximated without duplicating Heston's visage, which also is kind of a salute to the Mego Planet of the Apes line, where they also didn't have his likeness rights, and so they just called the character Astronaut, I believe. I think that's what they called him. The figures look like they could mix in with a Kenner run for the most part. The only thing that would keep you from knowing that was not the case is if you lived back in the 70s and 80s like I did and you knew that those lines had never existed. One of the interesting aspects of this for me is, in this case, the packaging and the presentation has improved at the same time as they are delving into lines that were really already created. So, you know, Back to the Future, Karate Kid, Escape from New York, Goonies, those were all lines that never got a toy line. So that was the appeal at the time for those lines to come out. Now we have Planet of the Apes and Street Fighter 2, and we also have Masters of the Universe as a Super 7 ReAction line. Those are all lines that already existed in a very different form back in the vintage era. So you had Mego doing Planet of the Apes, you had Hasbro integrating Street Fighter 2 into their G.I. Joe line late in the game in the early 90s. And then, of course, you had Masters of the Universe being done by Mattel, which is a legendary line. But to get to my point about why I didn't open most of these, I only opened Zangief, is because with the packaging having been amped up so much in quality, I really feel like that's part of the price you pay now. You know, when you were getting them at Movie Stop in the original Funko ReAction line, you know, you were getting them for a lot less because they didn't spring for likeness rights or an artist to do a rendering or something like that. It wasn't as troublesome to open one up. You didn't feel like you were, you know, burning money. In this case, I really feel like the packaging is part of the collectible. It's part of the experience. And if you separate one from the other, you're really taking something away from the whole. I can't bring myself to open these up because the packaging plus the figure inside as an overall simulation of the vintage era of toy making, that's all part of the Super 7 ReAction experience. They have created an experience with these new lines, no doubt. The artwork is strong. The choices of the properties are strong. You know, the Masters of the Universe card backs that I've seen are really cool. I don't know if I necessarily had ever desired or wished for 3 3/4 inch Masters of the Universe characters, but at least what they're presenting as a display collectible in package looks slick. I mean, it looks nice. The question you have to ask yourself, as with any of these, you know, retro lines, is do you want to go delving into those if you can spend that money on vintage stuff that you would have encountered as your youthful self would have? You know, for me, it's no contest. For me, while I absolutely love the effort that has gone into these, and some of my favorite characters are now finally in 3 3/4 inch, like Chun-Li, Cornelius. I love Cornelius from Planet of the Apes, or Galen, depending on if you're watching the TV show or the movie. I love the fact that Nova finally has her own action figure with a really nice portrait on it. I think that looks great. And they come with the little rifles and some of the other accessories. I mean, they really did it up like a vintage action figure line. But the question is, would I have gone after these had Super 7 not reached out to me and sent them my way? honestly, I would not have. The only reason these came into my studio was because Super7 reached out to me and asked me if I would talk about them and give my assessment of them. Which, again, they're not a bad product, especially when you keep them married to the packaging. They would really pop in a wall display. Especially the Planet of the Apes ones. I mean, they all look good, but the Planet of the Apes ones really look like Mattel's Clash of the Titans toy line renewed. Like, you know, if Mattel had done Planet of the Apes back in the early 80s, this is what the packaging would have looked like. I mean, it does look great. It kind of evokes that, Butch and Sundance line from Kenner as well, the packaging artwork style. I think Super7 has really upped the game in that respect. Unfortunately, as with the previous Funko distributed ReAction figures from Super7, the sonic welding is still not there. The sonic welding is continuing to split. And if you really want to entice people to pop those figures off the cards and integrate them into your displays or into their displays with their vehicles and their play sets and all that kind of stuff, and get the Instagram pictures going and all the things that a company hopes will happen with their products these days, especially toys, you're going to have to up the quality of the sonic welds. The sonic welds, they're just not, they're not holding. And I don't know if it's a different technique. I would love to find out if you were all at Super7 using a different technique to seal the figure's joints and bodies together. And maybe it's totally durable and you've stress tested it and, it's good for 50,000 cycles of the arms or whatever. I don't know, but it doesn't look good when you start moving things around and shoulders start splitting and rear ends start splitting and everything like that. If you are a Planet of the Apes fan or a Street Fighter II fan or a diehard Masters of the Universe fan, then I would target focus getting one of these lines if you like modern stuff. If you're collecting Masters of the Universe and you want to get everything Masters of the Universe, then by all means, go see if you can get the Super7 line to keep in the package. However, if you're only in it for the Classics line, for example, from Super7, formerly Matty Collector, then I would stick with that. It is superfluous in Masters of the Universe case. Planet of the Apes, on the other hand, I think this, just from a presentation perspective, is a real home run. If I was a diehard Planet of the Apes fan, not only would I be trying to get the Migos, complete, but I would also see these and go, you know what? I need those figures for the line. I really need those for my display. So it really just all boils down to presentation. I would not say the same thing for their earlier efforts, like, Back to the Future. I have a DeLorean, I have Marty's outfit, I've got the camera, I've got the flux capacitor, I've got all that stuff. But I did not spring for the Funko ReAction Back to the Future line beyond getting Marty and Doc just to check them out. Because the packaging was bad, the paint apps were bad, the quality wasn't there. I didn't mind the retro likenesses. That was great. The retro likenesses is what you want because, Luke and Han didn't look like Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford when Kenner brought them out because of the simplicity. That's totally fine. That's what you want. But the presentation wasn't there. And if I'm buying modern for my, collection of stuff for a specific license, the last thing I want to do is get 6 or 7 figures where the card back all looks the same. Now, on the other hand, if Super7 had any plans on re-releasing Back to the Future as a ReAction line with, card backs that look like the Planet of the Apes ones, then maybe I'd reconsider. Honestly, I might. But as it stands now, the earlier ReAction stuff is hit and miss. This stuff is at least coming in with a consistent presentation quality. The physical construction still leaves something to be desired, though. So if you're interested in these, then you got to be interested in packaging and presentation. Because if you're interested in them to open, I can't recommend them. So I know I've rambled a little bit, but those are my thoughts. This is kind of fun to take on a few modern things every now and then. So you'll be seeing more modern musings in the future. Thank you for supporting us on Patreon, those of you that have already. For those of you that haven't, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/RetroBlasting. And I want to thank Super7 for sending me these samples. It's been an eye-opening experience, and you're creating some beautiful beautiful retro-styled display pieces. Just improve that quality of the build, and you're almost there. You're almost there. So thanks for watching this, everybody, and we will see you on the next video.